Thunder cracked so loud the windows shook. People poured out of their houses, barefoot on the dusty road, eyes wide as the ground trembled beneath them. Chickens scattered, a lantern crashed and shattered, and somewhere a baby started screaming. In the middle of the village square stood a boy. He was thin, barefoot, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. His chest rose and fell too fast, as if he'd been running, but he didn't move. He just stared straight ahead while the earth shivered around him. "Eli!" a woman cried, shoving through the crowd. She grabbed the boy's shoulders and pulled him toward her, voice shaking. "Don't, Eli. Don't try to speak. Do you hear me?" His lips were parted like he was about to say something. The tremor deepened. Dust trickled from the cracked walls. A pot slid off a shelf and burst on the ground. "Please," she whispered, pressing his head to her chest as if she could silence the whole world by holding him tight. "Don't say a word." Slowly, painfully, Eli closed his mouth. The shaking stopped. For a moment, the only sound was ragged breathing and the distant cry of the baby. The villagers stared at the boy and his mother. Someone muttered, "It's him again." Another spat on the ground. No one came closer. Mira did. She was 12, only a year older than Eli, with braids swinging and furious eyes. She shoved past a man blocking her way and ran to them. "Leave my brother alone." She snapped at nobody in particular, her voice sharper than the broken pottery at her feet. "He didn't do anything." Eli lifted his head. His eyes searched her face as if asking a question without words. "I'm fine," Mira said more softly, answering what he couldn't ask. "Are you?" He nodded once. Their mother's hands still trembled on his shoulders. "Everyone, go back to your homes," she called, forcing her voice to sound steady. "It's over." But it wasn't over. That night, tongues wagged in every corner of the village. In the flickering light of small fires, people whispered, "The boy is cursed," and "No child should carry power like that," and "It isn't natural for a son to never speak." Eli listened from the shadow outside their thin mud-brick house. He couldn't hear the words clearly, but he knew the tone. He'd grown up with the way people looked away when he passed, the way children stopped their games when his bare feet met the dust near theirs. Inside, Mira pushed aside the old cloth that served as their door. "Eli," she hissed, "I know you're there. Come in." He stepped inside, eyes dropping to the worn floor. A small cooking fire glowed in the corner. Their mother knelt beside it, stirring something watery in a pot. The lines on her face looked deeper in the red light. She didn't look up. "You almost spoke today." Eli swallowed, his throat tight. He lifted his hands, hesitated, then slowly mimed the ground shaking, his face wrinkled with apology. "I know you didn't mean to," she said. "But meaning doesn't matter with your voice." Mira crossed her arms. "It's not his fault. None of this is his fault." Their mother let the spoon rest. "Sit," she murmured. They obeyed, settling on the floor across from her. "You were too young to remember," she said quietly. "But I remember. Your father remembered. Every day, he remembered." Eli's chest tightened. He knew this story, but she rarely told it. Maybe she needed to remind herself as much as them. "You were too," she continued. "You had never spoken. Not even Mama. I used to lie awake at night wondering if you ever would. I prayed that you would." Her voice broke and she laughed bitterly. "Careful what you pray for." Mira shifted, her eyes flicking to Eli. "One morning," their mother said, "you were sitting on your father's lap. I was by the door, washing clothes. The sun was bright. I can still see it, like it happened yesterday. And then you looked up at me, and you opened your little mouth, and you tried to say Mama." She paused. The sound that came out wasn't a baby's first word. The house groaned. The cups on the shelf shattered. The ground beneath us cracked open like it had been waiting. "Your father," her jaw clenched. The wall behind him split. Bricks fell. "We both could have died." Eli's hands shook. He stared at them, remembering flashes he never knew were real. His mother's scream, dust in his eyes, his father's blood on the floor. "We dragged your father outside," she said. "His leg was ruined. He never walked the same again. He told me. He must never speak again. Not a word. His voice is not a voice. It's a storm." She finally looked up at Eli. Her eyes were wet and fierce. "He died believing that. I promised him I would keep you silent. For your sake. For everyone's sake." Myra's voice was small. "But what if he's more than that? What if he's not just danger?" Their mother turned to the fire, as if she didn't want them to see her answer. "Danger is enough. Silence settled between them. Eli felt it like a heavy blanket. It was always like this when the story came up. Guilt, fear, and something else he couldn't name. Mira scooted closer and bumped his shoulder gently. "You're not a curse," she whispered. "You're my brother. That's all." He met her gaze. For a second, something like a smile flickered in his eyes. The next day, the whispers escaped the village. A traveling merchant passed through at dawn, his cart piled with fabrics and spices. He stopped at every house, trading gossip as easily as goods. By noon, he had heard 3 versions of the story. A boy whose eyes made the ground tremble, a boy whose silence summoned storms, and a child who could kill with a single word. The merchant did not keep the story to himself. By the time he crossed 3 rivers and a stretch of dark forest, the tale of a boy who could shake the earth with almost a word had grown teeth. In a stone fortress beyond the trees, men in black armor repeated it to a woman with a thin scar along her jaw. "A silent boy," she mused, fingers drumming on the table. "Power bottled in a throat." "Where?" "In a poor hill village, Commander," the scout said. "Easy to reach, easy to break." Her mouth curved. "Then we'll test his silence." 2 mornings later, Eli woke to the sound of hooves. He and Mira were under their tree, the wooden pendant still warm from her knife. She had just tied it around his neck. "There," she said, satisfied. "Now even if we're far apart, you'll remember I'm stuck with you." He smiled with his eyes, touching the crooked lines she'd carved. Then shouting rolled up from the village, sharp and panicked. Myra's head snapped up. That's not normal. They ran. Smoke already smeared the sky. Men in black armor kicked doors open, dragging people into the square. One shoved an old man to his knees. Another yanked a wailing child from her mother's arms. "Search every house," a harsh voice barked. "We're looking for a boy. Young. Dark hair. Quiet. Bring him to me." Mira yanked Eli behind a half-collapsed wall. His chest heaved. He didn't need to understand every word to feel exactly who they meant. "They're hunting you," she whispered. He shook his head hard, hands flying. "I didn't do anything." "I know," she said. "They don't care." A hand seized her shoulder and ripped her backward. Mira screamed as she was dragged into the open. Eli lunged after her, but a spear barred his chest. He stumbled, fury and terror crashing together inside him. A black horse stepped into view. The woman with the scar sat straight in the saddle, cloak hanging like a shadow. "Does this one talk?" she asked lazily, looking Mira over. "More than you," Mira spat. The commander laughed once. "Wrong child. Where's the other?" Eli's mother burst from the crowd. "Please," she cried, dropping to her knees. "Leave them. Leave my son. Don't make him speak." The commander's gaze sharpened. "Don't make him speak," she repeated softly. "Interesting." She dismounted and walked toward Eli until he could see the tiny flecks of color in her dark eyes. "Have you ever heard your own voice, boy?" she asked. He shook his head, muscles trembling. "Commander," one of the soldiers said, "if he is dangerous, we should bind him and—" "No," she glanced at Mira. "Take the girl. If he cares, he'll follow. If he doesn't, he's not worth our time." Mira kicked and fought, but armored hands lifted her like she weighed nothing. "Don't you dare follow me," she yelled at Eli. "You stay safe. You hear me." A gag cut off the rest. The wagon rattled away, wheels grinding grooves into the road. Dust swallowed her struggling form. Silence slammed down after the hooves faded. Eli stood shaking, fists clenched. His mother grabbed his arm. "Listen to me," she panted. "We will beg. We will hide. We will do anything. But you cannot go. If you speak, you could kill the whole valley. You could kill her." The words struck like stones. He saw it. Myra's body under fallen walls, her hand limp, the pendant cracked. The image made his knees weak. But another picture pushed back. Mira under their tree, pressing the crooked bit of wood into his palm and saying, "You'll remember, I'm stuck with you." He put a hand over the pendant now. It dug into his skin, a tiny, stubborn weight. Slowly he shook his head. His mother stared. "Eli," he pointed after the wagon, then tapped his chest. "I have to." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "If you lose control, there is no fixing it." He looked at her, at the village, at the cracked walls and frightened faces. Then he turned and started walking toward the hills. He did not look back, even when she called his name until her voice broke. The path out of the village clawed at his bare feet. Thorns tore his trousers. He hardly felt them. Every step beat time with a single thought. "Mira." Mira, Mira. By dusk, smoke smudged the sky ahead, thicker than any cooking fire. Voices carried on the wind, rough laughter, metal clanking. He crept close until trees thinned and the seekers' camp came into view. Tents ringed a blazing fire. Horses shifted at posts. Weapons leaned in careless piles. And there, tied to a post near the largest tent, sat Mira. Her wrists were bound, but her glare was fierce enough to cut rope. "When my brother finds you," she told a passing guard, "you're going to wish you'd never learned what a voice is." The guard snorted. "If your brother comes here, he won't leave." Eli almost smiled despite the fear strangling him. He counted soldiers. Too many for any clever plan he didn't have. No way to sneak her out without tripping over armor. All he had was the storm in his throat. And maybe, for once, that was enough. He stepped out from behind the last tree. "Hey," a soldier barked. "You." The camp turned as one. Myra's head snapped around. Her eyes went huge. "Eli," she breathed. He walked until the fire's heat licked his skin. The ground felt thin under his feet, as if it, too, were holding its breath. The commander emerged from the biggest tent, fastening her cloak. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," she said. "Love makes good bait." Eli's hands shook, but he kept going until there was nothing between them but a strip of dirt. "Speak," she ordered. "Show me why the earth listens to you." Mira thrashed against her ropes. "Don't," she shouted. "Eli, don't do it. Just run. Please." The commander lifted a finger. A soldier drew a knife and pressed it to Myra's throat. "You speak," the commander said softly, "or she dies now." The world narrowed to the circle of metal at Myra's skin. Eli felt every heartbeat he'd ever held back, every word he'd swallowed until it burned. Fear roared through him, but underneath it there was something else, small and fierce. He closed his eyes. He saw his father's broken body, his mother's shaking hands, Myra's laughter under their tree. He felt the pendant against his chest, two crooked lines scratched into wood. He drew in a breath. "Stop," he whispered. The word was tiny. The answer was not. The air exploded outward in a rippling ring. Sound slammed into tents, snapping ropes, hurling men backward. The fire flattened to the ground, then burst upward in a wild, high roar. The knife flew from the soldier's hand before it could cut. He crashed into a wagon that splintered under him. Horses screamed and broke their tethers, bolting into the trees. The ground cracked from Eli's feet to the commander's boots. She staggered, catching herself on a shattered post, eyes wide. Eli dropped to his knees, hands pressed to the earth. Pain hammered his skull. It felt like the word had been torn out of him with hooks. For a moment, nobody moved. Then every soldier in the camp seemed to remember how eyes worked and what they were looking at. "Don't go near him," someone hissed. "He'll open his mouth and we'll all be dead." Myra's ropes hung half loose, shredded by the shockwave. She tore free, stumbling to Eli's side. "Hey," she gasped, grabbing his shoulders. "Look at me. I'm here. I'm fine." He forced his eyes open. When he saw her, something in him unclenched. "You absolute idiot," she whispered, voice shaking with tears and laughter. "You saved me." The commander stared at them, breathing hard. Rage and fear warred in her face. She took one step forward. Then another crack sounded under her boots as the broken ground shifted. Her men flinched away from Eli as if he were fire. "We should go," one muttered. "Next word brings the camp down." She looked from their terrified faces to the boy still kneeling in the dirt. Finally, she spat on the ground. "This isn't over," she said. But she was the first to back away. In moments, the seekers were mounting horses, grabbing whatever hadn't been smashed, fleeing into the dark trees. They did not look back. The camp fell silent except for the popping of broken wood. Mira slipped an arm under Eli's and hauled him upright. He leaned on her, shaking. "Come on," she murmured. "We're going home." Villagers waited at the edge of the fields, drawn by the distant roar. When they saw who walked out of the trees, they surged forward and stopped, unsure. Eli's mother ran ahead of them all. She wrapped both children in shaking arms. "You spoke," she sobbed into his hair. "You spoke and we're still alive." Eli sagged against her, exhausted. He lifted a trembling hand to his throat, then to the pendant. It was unbroken. Mira pulled back enough to look at him. "You didn't destroy us," she said softly. "You saved us. Remember that next time your brain tells you you're a curse." A weak smile tugged at his mouth. That night, As repairs began and fires burned low, people still whispered about him. But their voices held on now, not just fear. Under the same old tree, Eli sat beside Mira, the pendant lying between them. "If you're still here, listening," Mira said suddenly, glancing toward the invisible audience just beyond the dark, "don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments what you do with a voice like his." Eli gave her a baffled look. She grinned and bumped his shoulder. "What? If people want more tales of hidden power, they need to let us know." He picked up the pendant and closed his fingers around it. The boy who never spoke had finally used his voice. For the first time, the silence that followed didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a power he chose.